Welcome to the Beacon House School of Tomorrow event, Towards Better Futures. This is the 14th edition of the School of Tomorrow events. Beacon House hosts this as their CSR activity, and it's really to have a global dialogue which can inform how education, takes place in their school and outside of their school. So please welcome to our panel. Our panel is, I believe, the eighth panel of a two-day series. Our topic is digital media turning us into dopamine addicts? And I will be kind of leading this conversation today as your moderator. My name is Elise Valji. I am a mental health professional. I'm currently leading my startup Saya Health, which is a tech business, and we provide mental health services to companies, to educational institutions, and to individuals across Pakistan and the Middle East. I also work as a counselor in my private practice. I used to work with children, then I worked with teenagers, then I worked with young adults. Now I work with adults, and I'm also trained to facilitate yoga and dance meditation. So I think some of these interests and experiences will be really coming into the conversation today. However, we will mostly be hearing from our esteemed panelists, who I'm very excited to introduce. Um, let's start off with Ms. Sabina Khatri. Sabina Khatri is she's the founder and the chairperson of Kiran Foundation, which is a school system in Liari. Liari is a very conflict-ridden area of Karachi, Pakistan, and I think Sabina has really kind of taken on a very trauma-sensitive approach to her school system. She has really addressed the violence and the trauma that these students come from, and she's really created a school system out of it. And there's a lot of focus on early childhood education as well. So I've actually had the kind of fortune to be able to witness some of this work firsthand, and I can really vouch for it. So Sabina's work is very holistic, and into this conversation, she brings a very holistic lens. Um, all of our panelists here today are educationists. That's what they have in common. So Sabina's will be holistic education that she brings in. And she has been really acknowledged for her work. She's received a lot of awards. She's been featured in documentaries. The most notable and recent accolade that she has had is the Sitara Imtiaz, which is the highest civilian award in Pakistan that she got in 2020. So, welcome, Sabina. I'm excited to hear your insights in the conversation. And I hope that we actually are able to really hear you because Sabina unfortunately had to stay back in Skardu. So, her internet is a bit spotty. She's in the mountains of Pakistan, but hopefully, we'll be able to hear her voice and her important contributions. Next, I'd like to introduce Mr. Syed Sultan Ahmed, who is joining us today from Bangalore. So Mr. Sultan is actually the MD and the chief learner at XLL Ideas. So he actually has another very interesting approach to education, right? So he focuses on film as his methodology, and he's created filmmaking events, and he's created other kind of competitions for students to learn through film, creating their own, watching others film. And he actually believes that if you introduce education or a subject into the classroom, that's really going to just ruin it for the student, and we need to look at other ways of learning. And he has a lot of focus on lifelong learning. So with this very kind of nuanced approach to education, I'm very excited to see what he brings in to the conversation today. And of course, his experience working through Asia and through working with children on a global level, I'm excited to hear about that. So welcome, Mr. Sultan.
Thank you, Elisa. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Then we have Miss Sanya Noman Ahmed Sultan. So she is the president and the founder of Khwabe Kishwar Foundation, which is based in Karachi, Pakistan as well. So what they do is they focus on a few different areas. They focus on education, healthcare, disaster relief, employment generation, right? So they kind of operate on the principle that if you feed a fisherman one fish, you've removed their hunger for that one meal. But if you enable the fisherman to fish, then you've really kind of secured their livelihood for the future. So that's the principle that they operate under. But the exciting thing that Sanya is bringing into this conversation is her age and her background. So she's 19, and all the people who run her organization are teenagers. So this conversation that we're having here today is across countries, and it's across generations. And so I'm really excited to hear once again Sanya's voice in this conversation too. Um, our fourth panelist is currently experiencing a storm in China. That's where she's based. However, I'll introduce her anyway in the event that she is able to join in at some point. So, our fourth panelist is Miss Bronwyn Jacobs. She is a media journalist, firstly. Secondly, she's an educationist. So she used to be a business owner and then she turned into an educator, and she's been teaching in the Middle East, she's been teaching in China. And the things that she's really proud of is educating her biological children and also educating the children that she's worked with internationally. Yeah. So welcome, Ms. Bronwyn, as well. Welcome to all our panelists. And what we're talking about today is digital media turning us into dopamine addicts? So we're in the 21st century. Digital media technology is something that has really kind of enabled us. It's really helped us, especially during the time of the pandemic. Many people have been able to study from home and work from home, be employed from home during the pandemic through technology and through digital media. So it's really quite a blessing. Um, However, along with this blessing, there have been some issues as well. It's affected our behavior in some negative ways as well. Firstly, we are very dependent on this. We're very dependent on our technology. It's absolutely almost a sin to disconnect from our smartphones, to be unavailable for a period of time. There's this dependency that has been developed. And when you talk about social media, I think that has really changed the way that we see the world and the way that we function in the world as a society, and especially with the youth, because the youth have actually been born and been raised and developed in a world that social media has always existed in. So it's actually shaped their psyche, and that brings with it a completely different set of things. So I'm going to, pose our question to our panelists, and I would love to hear from their experiences, from their perspectives. What do they think about the topic? Yeah. But before we do that, let's kind of really set up the premise of our panel today. So, is digital media really turning us into dopamine addicts? And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is the use of digital media. Is it promoting addictive behaviors or is it promoting adaptive behaviors? Do we really need to be concerned right now? Yeah. So that's the premise. So I think the first person I'd like to hear from is Ms. Bronwyn. If you could please comment on the topic of our conversation, and welcome. I'm glad you were able to join us.
Thank you. We're having a storm here in China. Very glad to be part of the panel. I'm going to cut straight to the straight to the topic. As an educator, I have seen the evidence of the impact of social media long before I think we can imagine, or long before I could imagine. I was a lecturer at Rhodes University, and I so evidently recall having to sit a student down and speak very clearly to her because of the misunderstandings she was making in her essays that she was writing. And that was already at a third year level. I became pretty disillusioned at what we as lecturers were encountering with our university students. And I shifted my focus because, as an educator, in my mind, with a media background, my question to myself was, how are we going to circumvent this challenge that we as lecturers are having? And my first port of call was to revert to early years education. I have since become a kindergarten teacher. and I'm going to say this on a very personal level. I recently worked with a set of colleagues who come from the West, USA in particular, and I have to be specific because we are speaking about specifics, and I think a lot of our challenges are arising from all parts of the world. So we all have to take ownership for the challenges that we're encountering. One of the areas I found a problem was that working with a colleague who did not know what a phoneme was. Now, in order for children to spell, you have to go through phonics. Once you know what every phoneme is meant to sound like, to create a word, to create a lexicon, to begin reading, to read, to write, then write an essay, and eventually get to university, you have to start at the beginning. And I am proud to be a part of the panel as a kindergarten teacher now, because this is evident even as far in the kindergarten area where social media has impacted. And I might have taken stock and note with university students. However, it is evident, like you say, children are born into social media. So ideologically, how we as educators position our lessons, ideologically, our ideological standpoint in a classroom is vital in how it is we navigate our lessons through media, using media, and making it age appropriate, because it's just a startling space that we are living in. I'm 54, teaching kindergarten. My children are grown. At the university, we were getting this short message system, SMS, in our essays. So we had to immediately fail students. And you can't fail a student without going to the root of it. So I'm going to stop at that point. That is my participation at this point in time of how I am excited to be a part of this panel, because I am in full agreement that we are all being comatosed by the excessive amounts of media we're consuming, but we don't all have the emotional intelligence to deal with the amount of information we're consuming. So
Right.
I hope I said enough for now.
Right. So you believe that this is a very valuable issue, and as an educationist, you feel, given how social media is impacting children, that our approach really needs to take that into account. So thank you for saying that, and thank you for sharing that it has really impacted, and you've seen the impacts in your work. Let's move next to Mr. Sultan. If you could please share your views on the topic. You're on mute. If you could unmute yourself, please.
Oh, yes. Hi, thanks for that question. And such a pleasure to be here, ladies, and to share some of my thoughts on this topic. And I'm going to answer this question in two specific perspectives. The first one, coming from a city like Bangalore, which boasts of some of the largest tech development spaces in the world, and on the other hand, from a educator point of view. Let me start off with the first one. From a technology point of view, this was the intent. All technology companies, all digital media companies, their goal is to have their users first onboard the users, and secondly, their goal is to increase usage time. And you've got some of the best minds on the planet coming together to figure out ways and means of ensuring that their users are on their platforms for as long as possible. The other way of looking at it is to try and get their users addicted to their platform. So in one way, you could say that this is kind of a battle that technology is winning hands down today, because the way it's designed, the way our young and old and all ages alike seem to be so addicted to it, is proof of the fact that it's working. Let me give you a simple example. A very interesting feature which was launched by Facebook, which is almost now a decade-old feature, is when you're chatting with someone, you see a term which comes typing and ... Did you know that was one of the single most revolutionary features that has been used on digital media and social media to entice the person to hold on to. So the moment you see that someone's typing, you will hold on and wait for them to complete so that you can respond. And almost all platforms, whether it's a WhatsApp or Facebook and Insta, everyone seems to be using that today. But that feature did not come out of the blue. There was a lot of thinking. There was a problem that needed to be solved. And the problem was, how do you hold on to people more onto the platform? So to give a one-word answer to your question, yes, it's serving the purpose. Now let's look at the other side of it. From an education, I'm a young parent. I have a 3-year-old, and I've been working with kids for now 2 decades. Almost all entrepreneurial ventures that have happened in the past few decades, it could start with the Coke to the McDonald's, go on to the television, to the phone. All of them are designed in a manner which kind of makes us addictive to. And every generation has its own problem. Even today, as I'm talking to you, as a world, we are still grappling with, dichotomy on one side where you have obesity. Let's take India, for example. We've got some of the highest obesity rates in the planet. And we also have some of the highest, malnutrition rates in the planet. And this kind of dichotomy in our society has been increasing the more we call ourselves that we're getting more developed. And similarly, when it comes to social media and digital media, the addiction is something which is following a certain pattern. We have the same pattern in food. We've got a same pattern in our climate, the emissions, and the whole world is talking about that now because of the summit here recently at Dublin. Issues like these are a part of our society, and that is where education comes in. And the basic problem with education is in most parts of the world. I've studied in the US, I've studied in the UK, I've taught in these countries, and I've taught in 19 other countries. In most parts of the world, education is designed for an individual to grow up to get life. Because we're always preparing our children to crack an exam for the 10th or the 12th grade, and after that to go and get into a university. And once you've gotten into a university, the whole focus is to get yourself a stable job, right? And the problem is that we're preparing children to get a job. We're not preparing them to live a better life. And which is where the challenge of understanding what's right for me, what's wrong for me, what's too much, what's the line to be drawn. These are not discussed as much as the formula in math or the theorems in science and physics.
Sure. So let's move to the next person, but I really appreciate your points. I think you made a couple of points. So firstly, from the kind of perspective of the creators of digital media, they are actually, the intention behind it is to make people addicted to it. That's quite interesting. And then on the other hand, you said that the way that we are consuming media, the kind of unhealthy behaviors that you can see, those go to show that there is an issue, there is something to address, right? So on the one hand, maybe we're like addicted, we're overusing, or maybe we have to completely disconnect to be able to survive. Those kinds of things really show that there is an issue with the use of digital media. So thank you for that perspective. And I think we will get a chance to talk more about how learning or education is for kind of grooming you for life, not just to retain a job, right? So thank you for that perspective. Let's hear from Miss Sabina, and I hope that your voice will be able to kind of be delivered. So Miss Sabina, if you can comment on the topic, do you feel that digital media is promoting addictive behaviors or adaptive behaviors? So I think we're not being able to hear you. There is a bit of a lag. Perhaps you could try with your video off. Or, yeah, let's try that. Can we hear you now? Yeah, so we're still unable to hear you. Perhaps you could type your answer in the chat box and I'll read it out. Meanwhile, let's hear from Miss Sania. So, Miss Sanya, what are your comments?
First of all, I hope you can hear me well. So, like, am I audible? All right.
Yes.
So, like, yes, we're definitely dependent and dependent on and addicted to social media or digital media. But then there are different aspects to it. So I wouldn't say like we are overusing it to like a greater extent, but because it just depends on if you're using it. If you're using it efficiently or if you're misusing it. So the content we've been exposed to these days, that our younger generation or our youth has been exposed to, it's obviously some of it is not the right kind of content that they should be getting before they're well educated, or like, because a big problem is that our generation or our youth, they got access to Wi-Fi before they had their minds well aware of how to correctly use it, or before they were well educated of how much beneficial things or productive things they could do with it. So there are different aspects to it. So if you're exposed to the wrong kind of content, if you're getting influenced by the wrong kind of people, or the content that is only meant for entertainment purposes, and it's not really educating you, or it's not really teaching you something beneficial, or if it's not something constructive, then obviously you're misusing it and you're overusing it. So we are addicted to social media and we are dependent on it, in the sense that these days we don't really have to uh, we don't have to learn the entire books in our education system. So we're moving towards Google, and we're moving towards the World Wide Web for any sort of information. So you don't have to learn everything in your mind. You can efficiently these search engines for any sort of information you need, or for any kind of research you want to do. You can take help from it. You can do like so many constructive and beneficial things and productive things can be done using social media, in the sense you can connect with people who are like not like who are continents away from you. But then in the same way, it's a bridge between continents, to connect with people who are in different continents. But it's a rock between communication in the same house. Every person in the house, they'll be sitting on the same couch, but they'll all be on their phones, not doing anything productive, or might be doing anything productive. But there's a lack of communication in the same house because we're addicted to it. And if we haven't normalized not using it for a while. So I think there need to be boundaries. There need to be what do you call it? I cannot recall the word. Or recall the word, but
So Sanya, we will talk about,
yeah.
how we can manage this in the upcoming questions. But for now, I really take your points. The first one being that, it's affecting how we interact with other people. For instance, if we are overusing it, that's why we're not really interacting with people who are actually around us in lifetime. That being one, and the other one being that there's actually a lot of different information that's coming in through media. It's not all education. It's not all informative. Some of it is actually just pure entertainment, and so some of that can have a very damaging impact on the person who's consuming it. If the way that they're consuming it is not being managed. So thank you for that. Um, so we do have Miss Sabina's comment as well here in chat. I will read it out, and then um, Miss Sabina, do you want to try speaking? I think you wanted to do that. Yeah, so there's still a lag. I will read out your answer. So Miss Sabina says, I just feel that the scarcity of general awareness makes every new facility a bit dangerous. For example, if we don't know anything about the function of the brain, we cannot even assume what social media can do to us. So that's a very valid point, right? So what Ms. Sabina is saying is that we're not even aware how social media, digital media can impact us, and yet we are using it. And I agree that that's, sets up a very dangerous problem right there. So yeah, thank you for that comment. I wish we could have some more of your comments, so feel free to keep sharing them in the chat box. So Mr. Beena is saying digital media did not come with any do's and don'ts.
Mm.
Very right. That's very right. It didn't come with any do's and don'ts. And so, of course, it can very easily be misused. It can very easily damage us. Yeah. So thank you for your comments on the opening question, on the topic, on the premise. Let's move forward into our conversation a bit deeper. Um, let's first kind of understand, how do we really define digital dependency, right? So we're saying that the use of social media, the way we consume it, the way we use digital media, our dependency on it is harming us. It's impacting our behavior negatively. But what is it? What we're calling this addiction? What is the thing that's harming? What is the behavior that's harming us? So let's speak to that first. And perhaps we could hear from Mr. Sultan first.
Sure. Thanks for that, Alize. I think that the idea of gratification and recognition today has changed, and changed tremendously. You know, there was a time when I was growing up in school in the 90s and you wore a new dress, you were looking for a compliment, from your friends back in school. But today it's very different. Any child who puts on a new dress takes a photograph, puts it up on the social media, and then is waiting for validation. And this is where the problem for me comes in, because for hundreds of thousands of years, we as humans sought validation through our own. And we sought validation through physical interaction. We sought validation. We called it social being, right? And we call social because we sought a lot of our powers or our well-being through the society that we lived in. And today, all of that has gone digital. Now, the challenge is that a child who's got, let's assume she's got 1,000 followers, and then she's had 100 likes on her dress, and she starts believing that that's the real life. And a lot of young people have started living their entire life. And it's not just young people. I know of a lot of middle-aged and even old-age people who live their entire social life digitally, and they're seeking validation. And for me, one of the biggest challenges of the digital and social media is that as a society, we've graduated to seeking validation, to seeking social recognition on a digital platform. And the same individual seems very awkward in a physical or an in-person real setting. And that dichotomy is a huge challenge. Because on one hand, it's nice for me, for someone who's grown up in the 90s as a child, to say or make a comment like this. But on the other hand, today, when you have your examinations online, your interviews are online, and you are working online, when all of that is happening completely digitally, to a great extent, they're justified because they're looking even for validation digitally. So it's very difficult to comment. It depends on which side of the divide you're sitting in. In India, we use the word a digital divide, right? On one hand, you do have, I feel proud as a country to see even my roadside fruit vendor actually taking digital payments. So when you go there, we don't actually give them money. You pay them through our phones or through our digital medium on one hand. But on the other hand, the same person does not even know how to interact, digitally with digital ethics. So the digital divide is the where, for me, the problem comes in. There are certain people who are living a large part of their life digitally, and there are certain people who are living a large part of their life still physically. And what works on one side does not work on the other side. So today, in 21, for us to pass a comment on whether it is good or bad is like saying in the 70s whether television was good for us, or saying in the 1930s whether telephone and cinemas were good for us, right? So while it is a passing phase in our lives, I think from a human behavior perspective, the biggest change is we're seeking validation digitally, and that is here to stay.
Yeah. So thank you for that. You mentioned validation seeking, the behavior of seeking validation, and how it's different in the online space and the in-person space. And you talked about how the online space has really become a space in the world that we live in today. And I can agree with you there. You know, when we talk about well-being and the different dimensions of well-being, like in the workshops that I do for one, and environmental well-being is one of the dimensions. And I say that, you know, today it's not just geographical locations or your home environment or your work environment, it's actually also the online world because we spend so much time living and functioning in there. So yeah, I agree with you. It's a whole new space that we live in. And you know, going back to what Miss Savina said, that you know, there are no norms or there are no set of rules that have come with it, right? There's no education that has come with it, but we are now forming our own norms. And I think we will, till we learn how to use it well, we will make mistakes. It will harm us in the process, I think. So let's move to Ms. Bronwyn. Ms. Bronwyn, what would you define as digital dependency?
I think I'm going to use myself as an example. I'm an addict. I recall my daughter asking me to put the phone away and asked me to put my cell phone into the booth of the car because she was talking to me and I wasn't answering because I was constantly on my device. And that was at least maybe 10 years ago. I reflected at that point in time. I recall putting my cell phone away in the booth, but I remember becoming irritated. I became agitated. And I remember listening to my daughter while we were driving, but I wasn't present because the entire time I was thinking of my telephone. I was thinking of getting back to that cell phone. And I come from a media background, so I needed to then communicate with what it is I was actually working on at the time. But with regards to the topic, I am a candidate. I am honestly addicted to media. I have recently deleted my Facebook and my Instagram, and I have to tell you, using myself as my very own control and experiment, I have become less anxious. I am finding that has done me a world of good to have taken myself off social media. The addiction lives in me. And with regards to the question in terms of, you know, this digital divide, what I know for sure is that there was a time when I was not connected. I was living, and I remember so clearly my former husband handed me, that time it was the BlackBerry phone. And I can't begin to explain to you the high I got from becoming a part of the digital connection. I wasn't, I was using the good old fashioned Nokia without the BBM at that point in time. And once I got my first BlackBerry phone and once I got my first BBM pin and started connecting, I didn't just connect globally. I connected and I became addicted. I raised my children through the addiction of my social media. The one saving grace was that, having studied media, I did not expose my children on media. I am going to say, with this digital divide and with our digital addiction, education is vital, be it from somebody who considers herself literate.
So, Brahman, I'm going to pause you there. I don't want to move on to the next questions, right? Which is about how we can address it and the importance of education to curb it. Rather, I want to kind of focus on what you just said. Thank you so much for being vulnerable and open with us about your experience. I think what you demonstrated is exactly the behavior of someone who becomes addicted to something, right? So so your family members being affected by the use. So saying, please put it away, please focus on me. When you put it away, you're feeling irritated while you can't access it. And what is the point where you actually feel better is when you completely have to disconnect from all use from it, right? So when someone is addicted to a substance or a behavior, they actually have to completely cut off cold turkey. That's the step that they have to take in order to get better, because it's such a huge dependence on it. And also, you mentioned the rush that you got when you first used it. So all of that, kind of demonstrates the addictive nature of digital media. So thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate that. Um, Sanya, I'd love to hear from you as well. Maybe you can kind of comment on how this addictive behavior shows up in the younger generation, if you could, please.
Yeah, so I think the biggest definition of addiction to social media would be that we have stopped living in the moment, especially the younger generation, where like every moment we're living, no matter if we're meeting a friend after years or if we're doing something important, if we're in a protest, if we're in an important meeting, we're discussing something important, or if it's anything related to our personal or professional life, or even if it's related to something we're doing for our own enjoyment, or if we're something doing something purposeful, all we care about is if what we will post about it on social media. So like we're like, oh, let's take a picture, let's post a story, let's make a post, let's tag the other person, what hashtags to put up. So the entire time our mind is constantly thinking about, we don't care about what that moment is. We care about is that what we're gonna post on social media about it. So we've stopped living in the moment. We just take pictures. We're just constantly thinking about how to put it up on social media. So I think that's a big problem, that where you're not enjoying the moment, you're not making the moment purposeful, you're not, whatever the purpose of your meeting or your discussion, your protest was, all you care about is that you're gonna post it on social media. And I think, so to seek validity again, as Sultan Ahmed said, we're seeking validity through social media. What are we doing? We just validity for.
Sure, sure, sure. So thank you for those comments. I think
Uh,
what's
Alice, can you hear me?
yes, I can hear you.
Oh, nice. Finally.
Yeah. Sabina, I'm just going to move into another sub question, which is coming from this question that I had just been asking. So, we've really heard from everyone what digital dependency looks like. And I think Ms. Bronwyn gave such a beautiful living example of that. Um, so, we're talking about how we're not living. So, I would love to spend a couple of minutes focusing on what does it mean to be living? What are we missing out on? What does that look like? So, if we could comment on that, and whoever wants to comment on that, whoever feels that they could add something to that. I don't know, Sabina, do you want to say something about that?
Yeah,
Since we
I better be part of the conversation before I lose you all again.
yes.
Being in the mountain has its own benefits, a lot of them, but then best, I think this is also a benefit that I'm cut away from social media for a while. I'll take it as a benefit, of course. Um, Living for me is to feel. I just feel that human touch. Um, it's so different to just say I love you here on social media than to hug somebody. I live around hugs. For me, that's the most important thing in my entire school system. If I just remove the hug, the way we meet every person every day in school, sometimes it takes me an hour to actually meet everybody, but for me that is the biggest motivation, or I should say dopamine effect that I have. and dopamine is not really always bad. It is the reason for us to stay alert, to look forward to things, to feel motivated. If we do not have dopamine being released in our brains, we may be very, very demotivated and very slow and kind of, rejected from life. So, dopamine itself, the dopamine effect that we're talking about, may not always be bad. So a little bit of everything, balance is the key, right? Now balance for everybody means something else. For us in Pakistan, especially when we're talking about the 80% of the people in Pakistan do not have the general awareness. They do not have the general awareness of life. So when something as complex as internet It's given to a public that does not have general awareness of hygiene even. So they do not really know what it is going to, how it is going to affect them. They do not see um, any sort of detrimental effect in it in the beginning. They just feel it's making them happy, it's making them stay busy, or very well, in Pakistan every person has a phone now. Even a person who's earning less than 20,000 a month does go ahead, save up money, and buy a smartphone. So it is reaching to the common people, to the people uh, who have not been aware about the simple effects of things in life. So I personally feel that it's very, very important to bring into the school life, and specifically, as Brownman said, in the kindergarten stage. That's where everything starts. To not, I'm very, very particular about it, to not bring digital media at that age into their lives. There they have the formal education starting from first grade onwards. That's when we start introducing them to digital media. Until then, let them play with twigs and stones and shells, and let them like hug each other, feel each other. So we basically more about reggio emilia kind of approach, but we use the stuff that we have readily available to us. By that time they start enjoying the effects of human touch, the effects of sitting in a lap of a grandma and listening to a story rather than sitting on a tablet and listening to a story. Yes, the tablet does help them in a way that they learn languages faster. They're getting prepared for the 21st century, but won't the grandmas be there in the 21st century? Of course, human touch is always going to be there. So we're going to lose on that, and that really scares me. That really, really scares me. And just to add on to my experience right now, I am here in the mountains for what, to look for a land where I can develop a farmhouse for my grandchild, because I know he's going to grow up in the digital media. So I want to establish a place where he can, or I have a small young grandchild, boy, who's 3 months right now, and I would want him to spend all his summers somewhere here where there is no internet, and he can run around the chickens and feed the animals and sit on ponies and things like that. I'm really scared for that. That for me is living life, human touch, and in one word, hug. That's for me is everything. Yeah, I don't know if that really
Yeah,
adds to the conversation.
it does. It does. I think you touched on a couple of things, so thank you for that. I'm glad we got to hear from you, on those couple of things. The first one being what really is living, um, because this is also very much an area of my interest, right? How do you be mindful? How do you take in all the benefits of any given present moment? And just kind of being close to nature, being close to other human beings in a more meaningful way so that we actually get the benefits of social connection. Um, it's interesting what you said, because I'm personally a bit biased because, as being a proponent of online therapy, that's what my work is. That's how I use online medium to get therapy to people who would otherwise no longer have access to it, right? So,
Mm.
and research says that online therapy, which is very much a one-to-one interaction, which is very much a relationship on a very deep level that heals you, um, that the effects of online versus in person are the same, right? In most cases. So therefore, I'm a bit biased, um, but like I appreciate your perspective that actually human touch is also very important, right? And that's
Right.
something that the online space cannot replicate. Um, and I think
Alicia,
also just
if I
want
may
to
just add,
that
sure.
thought. And you mentioned that like grandmothers or other kinds of interactions will never replace what you get online. But I think another point is that hits on the internet do not always translate into meaningful validation or meaningful interaction. So even if you are online, how can you make that interaction meaningful and not just one like on your Instagram page, right? Please, Mr. Sultan.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring into our discussion a very important perspective in this whole dialogue. And on one hand, you've got the platforms, you've got the internet, you've got the gadgets, which all by themselves, it depends on how you use it. I think the key word that we need to be talking about is the influencer, the content creator. Remember, in the past, there was a certain qualification that you needed to be called yourself a writer, a filmmaker, and there was an editor who actually looked into what you wrote before it got published. You had a censor board which looked into what you created before it got published in the public domain or released in the cinema theaters. So the idea of content creator in the past came with a lot of responsibility, came with a lot of learning, training, and education. It came with its own censors, whether it's an editor in a newspaper or an editor of a book, right? So it had all those pieces well in place. But today, what's changed, according to me, the biggest change that I see in the world that I live in is who can create content. Absolutely anybody can create any kind of content. And who is evaluating that content? And there's nobody in between.
Nobody.
It's straight out there to the user. And this freedom, this democratization of content creation, this is where the positivity of the digital and the social media is, and this is where the negativity of the social media is, right? While it allows voices, while it allows the young ones like Sania to come out there and talk about the wonderful work that she's doing, on the other hand, it also allows, people in different parts of the world, especially in the dark web, to kind of influence. So I think what's very important is for us to accept the fact that the influencer today, in the past, needed to have some qualification or some achievement. And that's when the society looked up to them as influencers. And today, mind my judgment there are lots of very, very flimsy individuals who are out there influencing millions of young people and old people alike. Mm-hmm. So the content creator has changed. There is no censorship, and the influencers, it's anybody's guess who becomes an influencer today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes.
That's our problem. The fact that we don't have a moderator. Human beings need, unfortunately, to be moderated, and living in a civil society. I think social media has just thrown us, as we knew ourselves before, into disarray. We are out of control, and with our different layers and levels of intellect, we all making sense of everything so differently. And I think you've just touched on how it is we maybe need to go forward. For me, as an educator, I am the moderator. However, as the moderator, I use my ideological standpoint. So I come from a thriving democracy, working in a communist country, and I think my students, and I say this with much pomp, well, I hope not to be pompous. I think that my students have a teacher who has the ability to know how much information to give. It's got to be age appropriate information. Like our the other panelist speaks about ratio and bringing in the basics of life. It is vital that children not be overexposed because they don't have the emotional, social development to process. So I don't know if I'm jumping the gun.
So Brahman, perhaps you could comment on just kind of moving into the part where what are actual practical things that we can do to solve the problem or address the problem that we really set up here. So if you could speak from your experience, how do you address this issue firstly?
Well, I think I am the classroom moderator. I am very outspoken. Coming from a media background, I'm a TV journalist. So I'm very aware of how to hook. We are taught how to hook the mind within the first 3 minutes. The purpose of a journalist, a television journalist, is to hook your mind, to keep you captivated, and to keep you online. That is that makes the difference between whether we're good or not. Being aware of that power and being aware of how strong a personality I am, because I come from a value-driven home, I have chosen to use my strength of character, my strength of intellect for greater good. So I minimize
Yeah.
media. I minimize, my students do not get more than 15 minutes a day of media. And when they
Okay.
do get media, it's got to be age appropriate. I
Right.
don't use images that will conform their minds. Instead, I use images that enable them to add value to ideas they already have.
Sure.
So I think going forward, we need to find ways of how we can bring in a moderator, how we can bring in people who have healthy value systems in order to become, it's got to be a very high bar.
Mm.
And we've
Sure.
got to take into account our culture. We've got
Yes.
to take into account political positioning. We've got to take into, well, geographical locations. And I just want to quickly switch to that. The school.
So we have to move to the next person. Sorry about that.
Okay.
I appreciate what you're saying. So your students are under your sphere of influence. How do you influence them? You moderate, right? You look at whether the content that they're seeing, how frequently they're seeing it. Is it age appropriate? Is it going to develop their minds or inhibit their minds, right? And you're saying that how do we ensure that everyone's content is moderated with high value systems, right? Um, Sanya, do you have anything to add here? What are some practical ways in which we can curb the issue we're talking about?
All right, so I totally agree with what you all said, that the bitter reality of humans is that we cannot control our mind. So on social media, we have access to inappropriate content we are otherwise deprived of in real life. So as soon as the younger generation, they get access to a mobile phone and social media, they immediately just get attracted towards the content they otherwise cannot, watch, or they're just deprived of that kind of stuff in real life. So the first thing they do on social media is that they get attracted towards the wrong content, but it's not totally their fault as well, because they are being, they're molded towards that stuff through the influencers or the content creators that we have. So 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 when the social media influencers or content creators, they get a lot of followers, they have a big responsibility. They have to make sure that they're creating the right kind of content. They're creating the content that has a purpose, that would be beneficial, that's not entirely based on entertainment only. It has, a constructive aspect to it. So I think we need to create awareness among the younger generation on how they can use social media in a constructive manner, how they can bring it to good use if they have access to something at the comfort of their home, from their home, so they can bring it to good use. So like my organization foundation, what we do is that we're running, we raise, we have all our donors entirely through social media. So not even a penny is raised by word of mouth or by physically meeting a donor or going door to door, or just collecting donations in person or doing fundraising
Sanya,
events.
I'm going to pause you there. Just want to kind of highlight the first point that you made, right? So you said that the influencers need to be conscious about what content they're putting out on social media, right? So I think we're all, Sultan kind of mentioned this, you mentioned this, Bronwyn mentioned this, the people who are really moderating or creating content, how do we make sure that their intentions are in the right place or their value system is in check? So perhaps influencers on social media, perhaps having like trainings for them or having like some kind of regulations in place to make sure that the content that they're putting out is going to, build our society up, not break it down. And Mr. Sultan, I don't know if you can comment, what can we do when it comes to the tech developers, for instance, who are, kind of creating this technology to make sure that we are addicted to it? What do we do
Right.
about that? Are there trainings, regulations? What can we do?
That's not going to change. Their revenue model revolves around having more and more people use their platform and get more addicted, right? And let's be fair on that. On the other hand, a Greta Thunberg would probably have 30 million followers on Insta, and a Kylie Jenner has 280 million. So if you're expecting influencers to change the way they create content, that's also not going to happen. But what's in our control is our immediate environment. And as a family, I think the family unit and the school unit, these are the two blocks where there is some level of control that we have. I think a family needs to have, and these are very simple things, a lot of discipline, and which is so easy to do but very difficult to follow. What is the regulation time that's given for screen time for children? I think this is one of the best practices across the world. No screen time in the bed, no screen time on the dining table, fixed screen times for children, and a lot of conversations with children from a parental side. And on the other side, the schools traditionally are very boring spaces. Please stop teaching them more and more information, because like Tanya said, all the information is available or out there at the click of a button. But what the internet can never do is create experiences. So for me, the future of schooling is where children come and have real human experiences, where, like not Aksha, the other panelists mentioned about the hug. Now that's something that you will never get on the internet, right? So spaces like creating more theater clubs and drama clubs and sport and extracurricular activities, these things teach you everything that you need to live about life. So
Right.
to sum it up, I think if we are expecting the platform creators and the influencers to change, we're living in a very wrong space. That's not going to happen. Can we look at what's changeable? That's the family unit. So schools need to work with the family unit. And within the school environment, we've taught our children traffic safety in the past. We've taught our children what's the healthy food to eat as a part of our curriculum. I think what we need to start introducing is what are the do's and don'ts? What are the things that are relevant and irrelevant when it comes to the social and business space?
Awesome. Thank you for that. So I think what you're saying is that there's certain things that we just cannot change, right? They're not something that we can control at this point. So our children will have positive influences and they will have negative influences, right? So if we believe that we cannot change the negative influences, what you're saying, how I heard it, is that build on the positive influences, right? So if we are educate them in a way that we actually get across to them. We actually really build them into good human beings, thriving human beings, right? Inspire them so that, we don't have to be fighting against the negative effects of digital media. So I appreciate that. And that's how I heard it. We have a couple of questions from the audience coming in, and one of them is, what role can elders, educators, parents play in controlling the influence of social media on digital addiction? So I think you kind of also addressed that. You said that, having timings that you use screen time, right? And when is screen time not okay? So for instance, during dinner time, it's not okay. Certain times of the day, making it not okay. Yeah. And the same person has another question as well. What can we do on an individual level to combat digital dependency? Do any of you want to comment on that question? Please, Bronwyn.
I
And
think
Bronwyn, we'll hear from you and we'll hear from Sanya, and we can just keep a minute to each of you, please.
I think the first thing that it's kind of like people, like what you offer, people need online counseling. There needs to be an awareness of what an addict looks like, and people need to be made aware that you can be addicted to various different things, be it shopping, smoking, chemicals, and in this case, social media. What an addiction looks like, where we can get help, that should be run across screens constantly. Every search engine should, by law, be made to run that as a bottom line, where people can get help for their social media addiction, what social media addiction looks like, and how much time should be appropriate on social media.
Amazing.
I
Yeah.
have urgent need that we should have, like we have a qualification to lecture, like we have a qualification to do whatever it is we need to do in the formal world, should now bring in qualifications to become influencers in society. And you should have to go through some kind of schooling. There should be some central board in every country that is culturally sensitive, geographically sensitive, and that is globally sensitive. And people who are influencers must take responsibility for the information they put out, and jail time should be served. So they should know the consequences of their behavior.
So let's hear from Sanya. Sanya, what are your comments on what can we do at an individual level to combat digital dependency?
So not at an individual level, but on how a system can be made to, work on it. So I think the one way we can actually teach our younger generation, our youth, or anyone on social media, the good use and the bad use, and how to prevent addiction with it, is that if we can have science, history, geography as part of our curriculum in the school system, then we must also have this as a subject in our curriculum of how we can beneficially use social media to actually do something that matters and to actually bring about a change. So I think it's really important to include it in our education system, in our curriculum, because if we can have subjects like history and geography, then we must also have something that really matters.
I agree.
Can I just add one small point?
Yes, please.
History is proof that for hundreds of thousands of years, weapons were freely allowed. People were allowed to manufacture their swords and their guns, and they were allowed to carry them. Till the time governments woke up and started realizing that today you need a legislation, you need a license to carry a gun in most parts of the world. Even to carry a knife, you need a license for that, right? You're not allowed to do it. So today, these are weapons in the hands of people. Digital media is a weapon in the hand of the people. I think this is early days. I do see in the coming few years, or probably hopefully in the next decade, when there are regulations like what Brahmin mentioned. But till that time, we'll need to guard ourselves because we're living in a world full of weapons, and there are most people who not necessarily have the balance to use it effectively.
Yes, so thank you so much. I'll add on to the question, which is about what do you do on an individual level. So I would say switch off screen time, take breaks from the screen, spend more time living, practice mindfulness, which is to be in the present moment, using all 5 of your senses, spend time in nature, connect with human beings on a deeper level, because we are like organisms of this world, and that's what we did before the digital media came along. So we are out of time. We do need to wrap up the conversation. I'm sorry. I know we all have so much to say because this is an issue that we all feel so charged about. Okay, so I think Ms. Bronwyn, you can comment. We are being allowed extra time. Go ahead.
Reading. People need to read. You read your way through life. You read your way to a degree. Nobody who is not literate should be on social media. And we should further define what is literacy, because not everybody who reads and writes is literate. We need to be able to ascertain what level of our levels of literacy across the world have got to be elevated.
Okay.
Right. And play a lot of sport, do a lot of physical activity. There's no better way to handle stress and get rid of any kind of addiction than the physicality of playing a sport or doing something which is physically involving.
Yes. Amazing. Thank you so much for watching this wonderful panel. I really enjoyed facilitating it. Thank you, Sanya. Thank you, Bronwyn. Thank you, Sultan. Thank you, Sabina. I hope that we can have this conversation once again at a later stage. If we keep kind of maybe taking some of our joint learnings forward and implement them. So thank you to the Beacon House School of Tomorrow for allowing us to have this conversation. And for those of you watching, please stay on for the following sessions.
Before we go,
have a great day.
All from? What countries are we all from? I'm from South Africa, working in China.
I'm from Pakistan.
I'm from Pakistan. And Mr. Sultan is in Bangalore right now, but he's on mute.
I'm from India, Bangalore.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Take care. Bye
Thank you,
bye.
guys. Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.